I was 68 years old when my daughter sat across from me at my own kitchen table, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Mom, you're too confused to handle your own money." The way she said it, slow, deliberate, as if she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror, told me everything I needed to know. She didn't realize I'd already hired a forensic accountant. And when I handed her his report 2 weeks later, I asked her to explain the $47,000 that had already disappeared from my accounts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That morning had started like most mornings since I retired. Coffee brewing, the smell of it filling my small kitchen in Savannah. I'd lived in this house for 31 years. My late husband, Richard, built the back porch with his own hands. Every creak in the floorboards was a memory. Every scratch on the doorframe measured how tall my grandchildren had grown. I wasn't expecting visitors. My daughter Rachel and her husband Kevin had stopped coming by regularly years ago. They lived 40 minutes away in a new development, the kind with gates and homeowner associations that sent letters if your grass grew half an inch too tall. They called on holidays. They visited when they needed something. I'd learned to recognize the difference between a social call and a transaction. When their car pulled into my driveway, I felt my stomach tighten. Kevin never came, unless there was business to discuss. Rachel walked in first, kissing my cheek quickly, the way you greet someone you're about to disappoint. Kevin followed, carrying a leather folder. Not a briefcase, a folder, expensive. The kind that holds documents meant to look important. "Mom," Rachel said, sitting down without asking, "we need to talk about your future." My future. Not our future. Not even the future. My future. As if it were a problem they'd been assigned to solve. Kevin placed the folder on the table between us, tapping it twice with his index finger. "We've been consulting with some professionals," he said. "Financial advisors who specialize in senior transitions." Senior transitions. I'd been a registered nurse for 42 years. I knew medical jargon when I heard it, and I knew how people used soft language to hide hard intentions. "What kind of transitions?" I asked. Rachel leaned forward, her voice dropping to that gentle, pitying tone I'd grown to hate. "Mom, you're getting older, managing bills, keeping track of accounts, maintaining this big house all by yourself. It's a lot. We've seen you struggle." Struggle. I hadn't struggled with anything, except their absence. "We think," Kevin continued, "it's time to consolidate your assets, simplify things. Let us help manage your finances so you don't have to worry." He slid the folder toward me. Inside were documents, dense with legal text, signature lines highlighted in yellow. At the top of the first page, I saw the words, "Durable power of attorney." "You want me to sign over control of my money," I said. "Not a question. Not control," Rachel corrected quickly. "Oversight. Protection. You've been forgetting things lately, Mom. Last month you called me asking where Dad's watch was. You forgot he's been gone for 3 years. I remembered that call. I also remembered that I'd been organizing old photographs and found a picture of Richard wearing that watch. I'd called to ask if Rachel wanted it for her son. She'd twisted the memory into evidence of my decline. "And what about the house?" I asked. Kevin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, eventually, it might make sense to downsize, move somewhere easier to maintain. Assisted living has come a long way. You'd have company, activities, and you'd have the house," I finished. Rachel's face hardened. "That's not fair, Mom. We're trying to help you." I looked at the documents again. Power of attorney, access to all accounts, authority to make decisions on my behalf, a line for my signature at the bottom of every page. "Leave these with me," I said calmly. "I'll review them." Kevin hesitated. He didn't like leaving evidence behind, but Rachel nodded, eager to appear reasonable. "Take your time," she said. "We'll come back next weekend to go over any questions." After they left, I sat in silence for a long time. The house felt different, as if it knew something had shifted. I'd spent decades caring for other people's families. I knew the signs of manipulation. I recognized the vocabulary of people who wanted something they hadn't earned. But what I didn't know, not yet, was how far they'd already gone. 3 days later, I drove to my bank. I hadn't been inside in months. I paid my bills online, checked my statements electronically. But something about Rachel's confidence bothered me. It wasn't hope. It was certainty. The certainty of someone who believes the outcome has already been decided. The branch manager, a young woman named Denise, greeted me warmly. She'd known me for years. I asked to see a detailed history of my accounts. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson," she said. "Is there anything specific you're looking for?" "Anything unusual," I replied. She printed the statements and handed them to me in a manila envelope. I didn't open them there. I waited until I was home, sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where Kevin had placed his folder. What I found made my hands shake. Withdrawals I hadn't authorized. Small at first, 200 here, 300 there. Then, larger amounts. $1,000 in November. $2,000 in January. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Over the past 18 months, nearly $47,000 had been drained from my savings. The account they'd transferred to was listed under Kevin's name. I didn't cry. I didn't call Rachel to scream at her. I sat very still and felt something cold and quiet settle inside me. The part of me that had survived night shifts in the ICU, that had held the hands of dying patients, that had delivered news no one wanted to hear. That part of me took over now. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a forensic accountant recommended by a former colleague. The second was to an attorney, a woman named Sandra Whitmore, whose office was downtown, above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and justice. When the receptionist asked the nature of my visit, I said, "I believe my daughter has been stealing from me. I need to know exactly how much, and I need to stop it." The investigation took 10 days. Sandra worked quickly, requesting records, tracing transfers, building a timeline. What she found was worse than I'd imagined. Kevin had accessed my accounts using information Rachel had provided: my social security number, my mother's maiden name, answers to security questions I'd shared with my daughter in moments of trust. He'd set up automatic transfers disguised as recurring bills. He'd even changed my mailing address temporarily so that certain statements went to their house instead of mine. "They've been planning this for at least 2 years, Sandra told me. The amounts were small enough to avoid triggering fraud alerts. They knew what they were doing." "Why?" I asked, though I already suspected. Sandra slid a document across her desk. A credit report, not mine, Kevin's. He was drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed. A second mortgage on their house. Gambling losses that showed up as cash advances from casinos in 3 states. Rachel had co-signed loans she couldn't repay. "They're not trying to protect you," Sandra said. "They're trying to use you to save themselves." I thought about my grandson, Ryan. He was 16 now, old enough to understand what his parents were doing, young enough to still be protected from it. I thought about Rachel as a little girl, sitting on Richard's lap while he read her bedtime stories. I thought about the woman she'd become, and I felt something like grief, sharp and familiar. But grief doesn't excuse theft, and love doesn't require surrender. "What do I do now?" I asked. "First," Sandra said, "we freeze everything. New accounts, new passwords, new security questions, nothing they've touched. Then we create legal barriers. A cease and desist. Documentation of the theft. A formal demand for repayment. And if they don't repay?" She looked at me steadily. "Then we escalate." The following week, Rachel called 3 times. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that started sweet and turned frustrated. "Mom, we're worried about you. You're isolating yourself. This isn't healthy. Kevin sent a text message. Your daughter cries every night because you won't talk to her. Is that what you want? I saved every message, every voicemail, every attempt at manipulation. On Friday evening, they showed up at my door, uninvited. I'd been expecting them. Sandra had predicted they'd escalate when they realized the money had stopped flowing. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Mom, Rachel said, her voice trembling. Please, let us in. We need to talk. We can talk here, I said. Kevin's face darkened. This is ridiculous. We're family. Family doesn't steal $47,000, I replied. The words hung in the air like a blade. Rachel's mouth opened, closed. Kevin went pale. Mom, I don't know what you think happened, but I don't think, I interrupted. I know. I have the records, the account numbers, the transfer dates. I have the forensic accountant's report. I have your husband's name on the receiving account. Kevin stepped forward, his voice dropping to something meant to sound calm but edged with threat. You're confused. You've misunderstood the situation. Those transfers were what? I asked. Authorized? By whom? Because my signature doesn't appear anywhere. Rachel grabbed Kevin's arm, pulling him back. Her eyes were wet, but I couldn't tell if the tears were real or rehearsed. Mom, please. We made mistakes, but we were trying to help. We're in trouble. Kevin's business failed. We didn't know what else to do. So you took from me, I said quietly. Without asking, without telling me, you took what I spent 42 years earning, and you called it help. Kevin's mask slipped for just a moment. Beneath it, I saw something I recognized from years in the emergency room. Desperation. The kind that makes people dangerous. You owe us, he said, his voice low. We've put up with your neediness for years. Every holiday, every phone call. You think family is free? Rachel flinched. Even she hadn't expected him to say it aloud. I took a step back and began to close the door. Don't come back, I said. Not without an attorney. The door clicked shut. Through the window, I watched them stand on my porch, frozen, before finally walking back to their car. Kevin slammed his door hard enough to echo across the street. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. But also, for the first time in months, I felt clear. The formal letter arrived at their house 2 days later. A detailed accounting of every stolen dollar. A demand for repayment within 30 days. A notice that failure to comply would result in civil action and a report to the district attorney's office. Rachel called 17 times that day. I answered once. Mom, she sobbed. You're destroying our family. No, I said. I'm protecting what's left of mine. I hung up and didn't answer again. 2 weeks passed. Sandra received a response from Kevin's lawyer, a nervous man who mostly handled real estate closings. He proposed a payment plan, $500 a month, no admission of wrongdoing. At that rate, Sandra observed, you'd be 93 before you saw half the money. Unacceptable, I said. I agree, she smiled. I'll counter. The counter was simple. Full repayment within 6 months, a formal written apology, and a legally binding agreement that neither Rachel nor Kevin would attempt to contact me, access my accounts, or contest my estate. Kevin refused. Rachel begged. Neither understood that I was no longer negotiating. I was setting terms. On a Thursday morning, Sandra called with news. They've agreed. Every condition. Kevin's parents are helping them pay. I felt no satisfaction. Only relief. There's one more thing, Sandra added. Your will. Have you thought about updating it? I had. In fact, I'd thought of little else. That weekend, I invited my grandson Ryan to visit. He arrived on Saturday, tall and quiet, with his father's jawline, but his grandfather's gentle eyes. He didn't know the details of what had happened, only that there had been a falling out between his mother and me. We sat on the back porch Richard had built, drinking lemonade, watching the birds at the feeder. "Grandma," he said finally, "Mom says you're sick, that you've been making bad decisions." I set down my glass. "Do I seem sick to you?" He looked at me for a long moment. "No. You seem like you. Maybe more like you than before." I smiled. "Ryan, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really listen. People will try to take things from you in life. Money, time, trust. Sometimes they'll be strangers. Sometimes they'll be the people you love most, and they'll have 100 reasons why they deserve what isn't theirs." He nodded slowly. "But you get to decide what you give," I continued, "and you get to decide what you protect. That's not cruelty, that's wisdom." He was quiet for a while. Then he asked, "Is that what happened with Mom?" "Yes," I said. "Your mother made choices that hurt me. But that doesn't mean I've stopped loving her. It means I've stopped allowing the hurt." He reached over and squeezed my hand. His grip was strong, certain. In that moment, I saw the man he was becoming. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he said. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You're the reason I still believe in this family." The following week, I finalized my new will. The house, the savings, the modest investments I'd accumulated over a lifetime, all of it would go to Ryan, held in trust until he turned 25. Protected from everyone, including his parents. Rachel found out eventually. I'm not sure how. Perhaps Kevin's lawyer mentioned it. Perhaps she simply guessed. She sent one final message, the last I ever received from her. "You've chosen a child over your own daughter. I hope you can live with that." I read it once, then deleted it. I could live with it. I could live with protecting the people who deserved protection. I could live with saying no to those who mistook my kindness for weakness. Months passed. The money was repaid, slowly, painfully. I donated half of it to a scholarship fund for nursing students. The rest went into a trust for Ryan's education. I planted a new garden in the backyard. Herbs, mostly. Rosemary and thyme. Things that survived winter and came back stronger. One afternoon, Ryan stopped by, unannounced. He was carrying a small wrapped box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a watch. Simple, silver, elegant. On the back, engraved. "For Grandma. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." I held it in my palm for a long time, feeling its weight, reading the words again and again. "I didn't buy it with their money," he said quickly. "I saved up from my job at the bookstore." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in months. "Come inside," I said. "I'll make us lunch." We ate on the porch, talking about his plans for college, his favorite books, his dreams of traveling after graduation. He didn't mention his parents, and I didn't ask. Some silences are kinder than words. When he left, I stood in the doorway and watched his car disappear down the street. The sun was setting behind the oak trees, painting everything gold and amber. For years, I had measured my life by what I gave to others. My time, my energy, my trust. I had believed that love meant endless giving, that family meant never saying no. But I'd learned something different now. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's consumption. And family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. I walked back inside and sat in my favorite chair, the one Richard always said molded perfectly to my shape. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful, earned. I picked up the watch Ryan had given me and fastened it around my wrist. It felt right there, like a promise. My daughter had said I was too confused to handle my own money. She'd said I was losing my mind, my independence, my grip on reality. But here I was, clear-eyed, calm, unbroken, and every dollar I still had was exactly where it belonged. If you're listening to this, and something in my story feels familiar, if someone in your life is using love as a lever, kindness as a key to your door, then hear me clearly. You are not obligated to fund your own erasure. You are not required to give until you disappear. Set the boundary. Ask the question. Check the records. Trust yourself. Because sometimes the people who say they're protecting you are the ones you need protection from. And sometimes the bravest thing an older woman can do is simply refuse to sign.